Hi, everyone. Yay, more people are here. Hi, Andy. My name is Gabrielle, and I'm a network administrator for XO Communications. I use Postgres mainly for network management tasks, keeping track of my configuration management and physical and logical connectivity and user history, stuff like that. I work out of XO's Portland, Oregon office. This is my first time here in Chicago, and I guess I could claim that I brought the Portland weather with me. Oh, are you? Because, you know, I looked at the weather forecast and it was supposed to be like sunny and beautiful, and I come here and going, I could have stayed in Portland.
It was like 85. It is sunny and beautiful here.
Okay. All right. It's sunny and beautiful right here, but this, I feel like I'm being interrogated. Okay. Broad outline of my talk. 3 basic topics I'm going to cover here. I promise, even though I am from the Pacific Northwest, there will be no spotted owl jokes or Monty Python songs, but I do have images of flannel and chainsaws in here, so if you find that disturbing, this may not be the talk for you. And you look confused. Are you here for the logging talk? No, him in the back. Okay. That's okay. In case you didn't read the full talk description, this talk is aimed primarily at people who have not set up logging before. So if you already have it configured and you're kind of an advanced user and are looking for help with that, you might be bored. Actually, no, you're not going to be bored in my talk. You just might not learn anything new. It's going to be entertaining, I'm sure. So why do you want to have logs? Well, you want to be able to find out about stuff like this. Maybe your coworker restarts your database, and you have no way of knowing that they did that and changed some things on the back end, and bang. All of a sudden, you're sitting there like, what just happened? Well, the database restarted, and you don't know. Possibly, you work with people who are practical jokers. And I'm going to pick on Magnus because he is not here to defend himself. Maybe your coworkers are just clumsy. Raise your hand if you've ever done something like this. Yeah. So this is a list of things that I came up with that I wanted to know about. Database events like starts and stops, who's connecting to my database. I also want to find out about data changes. If somebody goes in and, for example, updates someone's salary. I also want to know about schema changes, like somebody drops a table or whatever, like we just saw. Logging is also very useful for diagnosing problems with your front-end applications. If you were just in Stephen Frost's talk, this is an excellent gateway into finding slow or potentially failing queries. Something else you might need to consider, you may have a legal requirement to keep logs, keep track of who's logging in and things like that. With that, there is usually a time length of which you must hang on to those logs. It is also entirely possible that you have a requirement not to log anything, which would really be a bummer. But as long as you don't have that, check with your legal department. I really recommend that you have at least rudimentary logging set up, even if nobody else at your organization thinks that that's important. The key concept is you want to be able to find out what happened in your database. And this is the best way to do it. So I've convinced you that you need logs. Now what? Well, option to log comes with Postgres. You don't have to install anything extra. All you have to do is turn it on. It is super simple, right? Go find this parameter in PostgreSQL.conf. I hope you know where that is. If you don't, please use find. Uncomment it, change it to on, and restart your database. Then go find your log. That's what its name will be. And go see what's there. So in this talk, I'm going to show you these parameters as they come out of the default pg.conf. And so they're going to be commented out because those are the default settings. And any values that I change are going to be uncommented. So that's the syntax formatting of this talk here. So it really is just as simple, right? What could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out nothing, right? The defaults are very, Stephen in his talk called them, I think, horrible or obnoxious. I prefer to use the word conservative. You are not in a whole lot of danger of getting what we call a bad case of logorrhea. Okay? This is what we see when we just turn on the logging collector and run those 3 examples I had at the beginning with the database restart and the data update and the schema update. All I get is messages that my database restarted. So, okay, this is useful, right? But it doesn't cover everything that I wanted.
Can you please go back to the previous one?
Sure. This one?
So, yeah, the timestamp dot log. So how often that log files will be put a new timestamp?
Okay, so it's going to set that timestamp when you restart your database. You're going to get one with that timestamp on it. And then depending on how you have your log rotation configured, that will influence when the timestamp gets reset. And that's sort of towards the end of the talk. So, but yeah, that's a good question.
Logging collector is not only parameter, there are other parameters as well.
Correct. Yeah, logging collector does not influence that timestamp at all. There's another parameter that, that you can use to set that. OK, so people with giant saws. Right, OK. We're going to tweak our settings a little bit here. It took me a little while to figure out how the different log parameters interacted with each other, and I had to dink around with them a bit. So don't get discouraged, OK? This can be kind of like, what the heck? I am usually in the research first, push buttons later school of thought, although I certainly welcome people who like to push buttons first. I do encourage you to only push one button at a time and keep good records of what changes. That's really key to getting what you want out of your logs. And where here, pushing one button means changing one logging parameter at a time. So in PostgreSQL.conf, there are 3 basic sections that we're going to go over: where, when, and what. I'm not going to discuss every single parameter because that would be boring. I'm just going to talk about the ones that I personally like. You're probably going to end up with different settings than I have here, and you're probably going to want to experiment with some of the other more esoteric parameters. As I mentioned, the defaults are pretty conservative, so when in doubt, start there and maybe move things up a notch or down a notch. See what you get. You can set some logging parameters at server reload from the command line. I don't like to do that. I manage everything in PostgreSQL.conf, mainly because that is not going to roll out of my command history and leave me wondering where I directed my log file. I don't know if you've ever done that. That's fun. Where did I put that thing? So what is next? Right. Another advantage to managing your settings directly in PostgreSQL.conf is you can put it in your version control system. And I highly, highly recommend that you do this. I don't care if it's Git or SVN. I don't care if you use CVS. Just do it. And write yourself really, really pertinent commit messages so you know what you've changed, especially when you're fooling around with these parameters and trying to figure out what works for you. Because that's only a record you're going to have. So first section, what's a log? I'm actually not going through these in the order they are in the config because I'm kind of going simple to most complicated. And I don't really know why the sections got titled what they did. Just go with it. So what's a log? I think of this as kind of the basic settings. Remember from my examples at the beginning, I want to know if my schema's changed. I'm interested in knowing who's connecting. And there are some other little tidbits that I want to know about that we're going to look at as we go along. And I can get all of those things just by tweaking the parameters here under the what to log section. So first up, who's connected? This is super simple. Just like log collection, just go find these 2 parameters in Postgres.conf, turn them on, and reload it. Bang. This is what's going to happen. You can tell I logged into the TEV database, and then I probably changed to the prod database, which then kicked off a disconnect message from dev. And then so I'm hanging around here in prod for 34 seconds, which is probably enough time for me to do some serious damage, right? Groovy. So now that I've got that covered, what about the changes to my data? So we do this with log statement. The default is none, and which means no statements are being logged. This is your SQL statements. Values for this are none, DDL, mod, and all. DDL is your data definition language. Those are your alter table statements, anything that changes your schema. Mod is going to be your data modification statements, your inserts, updates, and deletes. And with that setting, you also get the DDL statements. So you're going to find out somebody changed your data or somebody changed your database. Awesome. All is everything, so that's all of those things plus your selects and a whole bunch of other stuff that you probably don't want unless you really need it for some kind of reporting tool or something. Now, I set mine to mod, and you can see that I obviously got the data modification message and the schema modification message. Everybody with me so far? Bang. OK, cool. So this is great, but I'm still missing important information like which database these commands were executed on and who was doing this. Because if you just know that it happened, you can't go beat on somebody's head. So we could piece this together with the information that we got from log connections. We could say, well, this person logged in, and then this happened, and then they logged in over here, and then this other thing happened. But you probably have multiple users, right, and multiple databases. So we're going to do something else that's easier instead of having to go through and match everything up. So this is logline prefix. This is one of my favorite parameters. Has a lot of options to it. This is not all of them. These are some of my favorites. It just adds extra info to your log message. It just prepends it. This is what I use down at the bottom here. And the next slide is going to show you that in action. So %T is a timestamp. That's what I've got right here. Happened at March 12th, something or other, Pacific time. Name of the database, my username, and the remote host and port. And then it tells you what I did there. So I can find that, and I can go say, hey, Gabrielle, what was that all about? Poor Magnus. I'm seriously picking on him. But you're going to want to work out your own logline prefix for this. And it may be influenced by which log parsing tool you want to use, which I'm going to talk about at the end a little bit. At the very least, put in a timestamp. Because the default value for logline prefix is nothing. And if you don't have a timestamp, you don't know when these events happen in your database, and you can't correlate them with hardware failures or network issues or whatever. And except for a couple of examples, I'm not actually going to show this in the rest of the slides because they take up a lot of room. So use your imagination.
So what should 6238 number be?
Sorry?
What are the numbers besides the
Oh, this is the, OK, so the %R is the remote host and then the remote port. So this is the port that I came in on. Yeah. Huh? Oh, yes. Oh, God, you're going to make me catch something. Awesome. OK, thanks, Andy. So now I don't have to walk anymore. Grand. All right. So this is really neat if you want to get into some super esoteric stuff. This is new with 9.0, SQL state error code, %E option. It's just a 5-digit code. See if that works. Whee! You'll get this 5-digit code in your log message, and you can look it up on any of the copious documents on the web and maybe find out a little bit more about your error. Sometimes it tells you something extra, sometimes it doesn't.
But it's also easier for mechanically analyzing.
True.
So you don't have to parse out.
True.
Wow.
This is an actual real-life example. Yeah.
Wait, what was the % for that?
%E for eek. I don't know. Error code. I like eek better. All right, so log host name. This works in conjunction with log connections and the %R parameters for logline prefix. It's basically, you're not going to get any benefit out of having this enabled if you're not using one of the other things. So if you're not, just leave the default off. But if you set it to on, and then, of course, reload, this is what you're going to get here. So whoa. Sorry if I just burned anybody's eyes out. Remote host before was an IP and a port. Now that I have log host name on, it gives me my remote host name. And I do really have a server named Fabio.
Does it cache that, or does it do the DNS separate?
You know, that is a really good question. I don't know.
What was the question?
Oh, right. Repeat the question.
Log host and cache the DNS lookup.
I don't know.
NSCD or something like that will cache. Yeah, something local should.
Yeah, but there is sort of like a little performance drag on this if you've got a lot of these. I don't have this enabled in my production systems just because I tend to be able to recognize the IPs people are coming in from, and if I don't, I can just look it up because it's all internal systems. Whisper, whisper? So no, okay. Side conversation, have it. All right, so to sum up, log connections on, log disconnections on, set log statement to mod. You probably want to start out with just DDL. And set your log line prefix to something that is meaningful to you. So now that I have who's doing what in my database covered, let's look into this when to log thing and see what this is all about. So this is where we decide what message levels we want. If we want to know only about errors or notices too, we can do investigations into queries that are maybe taking a long time to run. And these top three, logmin messages, clientmin messages, and logmin error statement, were probably the most confusing parameters that I worked with. So don't get bummed out if you don't figure these out. Something that I found really useful when working with logging was to write a file of SQL statements, and some of which I wanted to have logged and some of which I didn't. And then I would change the logging parameter, run the file, and see what showed up in my log. And if it wasn't quite what I wanted, I'd then go tweak something else. That's a neat little way to maybe automate things while you're working on this. So let's talk about log levels first. These are the values for logmin messages. The others are slightly different. The important thing to grasp here is that they go in order from kind of like least importance to greatest importance. Basically, this is, hi, I inhaled, or panic is, hi, my hair's on fire. Think of it that way. And another important tip is if you log at notice level, for example, you're going to get warnings, errors, logs, fails, and panics as well. You're not going to get just notice. If you've never done logging before, that may kind of be new to you. Yeah, the other thing. The level for the messages is set within Postgres, so you're kind of stuck with it. If you don't agree with it, you need to take it up with someone other than me. So, yeah, log and clientmin messages. Logmin messages, what gets sent to your log file, which we're going to look at later. Clients, what gets sent to your client, and then the logmin error statement is specifically for SQL statements. This is where things just got really confusing. I dinked around with these a fair amount and then just ended up setting them back to the defaults myself. So if you're not getting enough info, try turning them up, but definitely start with logmin messages. Right. Because funny things happen when you turn up clientmin messages. I thought that I needed to have that set at the same level as logmin messages, so I set them both to log. And then I was working in my database, and I would do an insert statement or what, and I would instantly get it echoed back at me. And it took me a little while to figure out where this crap was coming from. It's from clientmin messages, because everything that was being logged was also being sent to my client. Kind of a bummer. So, right, same thing with logmin error statement. Defaults are fine here. So don't worry about that. Let's get on to some fun stuff. Let's capture some queries. How many of you were in Stephen Frost's talk? Awesome. So this is how you do what he was talking about with logmin duration statement. Logs any statement that runs for longer than this amount that I specify, however many milliseconds I put in there. You can use units, so you don't have to do math to figure out how many milliseconds are in 10 minutes if you don't feel like it. Stephen recommended setting this to 50 milliseconds. I have mine set to, I think, about 3 minutes, actually. So yeah, your mileage may vary there as well. If you set this to 0, it's going to log absolutely everything, which can be quite a surprise. -1, obviously, is the default, so that's disabled. But this is what it looks like. You get a log statement, tells you how long it ran, and then select whatever. So you may be wondering, since we had that log statement setting that we configured before, where we were only supposed to have inserts updates and then alter tables, right? Why did I get a select? Well, it turns out that this interacts with log statement. You don't have to have log statement turned on in order to use this. However, if you have a statement that would be logged by both, for this example, an insert, you're only going to get the duration out of logmin duration statement. You're not going to get the duration and the query. So you get the duration from logmin duration statement, and then you get the statement from log statement. Is anyone like totally confused by that? Yeah. So kind of groovy. You got to go back through and match things up a little bit. And this is where your logline prefix comes in. You don't want to have any naked messages, because naked messages make forensics really, really hard. One of the things that you can specify with logline prefix, this is a little bit different from my previous example, is this %p. That's a PID, process ID. You can use them to match them up. You know that this is the duration for this process, and this is the statement. Cool. This will help you track stuff down. Which leads us right into something really, really freaking nifty, auto-explain. This is like logmin duration statement on crack. This is a contrib module from Takahiro Itagaki. I hope I said his name right. This was introduced in 8.4. I've been playing with it off and on. It's great. It automatically runs explain on every query that takes longer than the amount that you specify. It is a contrib module. So if you've never worked with contrib modules, you do need to install it before you can use it. So just go to your source contrib and make install. And the reason I'm including that is because it took me like 3 different websites to actually find complete installation instructions for this. So that may have changed recently, but yeah. So you got to be careful with this one, though. It can create a lot of output. Once you have it installed, this is how you configure it in PostgreSQL.conf. You have to have that shared preload libraries and your custom variable classes, and then this logmin duration. But you have to have the auto explain class in front of it. So you can get that set up. However, you can also load it from within PSQL and then set your duration to whatever you want it to be. And then just have your logs do their thing. For me, this is a safer way to do it than configuring this in PostgreSQL.conf. Why is that? What?
Does that go system-wide as soon as you load it and activate it, or is it just per your session?
It's just that session, as far as I know. I have not seen evidence otherwise. How's that? Does that work? OK. Yeah. Anyway, I don't have it configured in my production systems anymore. I'll run it from the command line if I have to, mainly because, as I said, this can produce a lot of output. And the way I discovered this was, I think it was like the first or second time I was playing around with this. And I was like watching all my logs go by going, this is freaking rad. And I work in a little office off of a telco node room, which basically looks a lot like a data center, but it just has much neater cabling. And one of our maintenance contractors was in there checking out our fire suppression system. And apparently somebody forgot to trip a safety switch. So I can tell you that when an FM200 tank discharges outside your door, you kind of forget that you need to disable the incremented log output before you go home. You may forget it for a couple of days, right? So when your system administrator then calls you and says, hey, we're kind of running out of space on the log partition. What happened back on Wednesday? You say, oh, yeah. So I don't leave this on in my production systems anymore. It's just a little too much data for me to handle. So yeah, keep that in mind. This is something you really want to know how much you're going to get before you unleash it. Oops. What? Hey. So this is what it looks like. No font can adequately capture the glory that is explain, but we're going to try. So note that you get, user database. This is from my prefix. You get the duration, and then your query, and then you get your plan. Really nice. But yeah, sometimes it can be a chainsaw accident waiting to happen. So to sum up here, we left some of these settings as the default, and we just want to know about any statements that take longer than 5 seconds. So, and I'm running a little bit behind schedule, so I might have to start talking at like a speed of 1.5 New Jerseys here. Okay, so my favorite part, where has my little log gone? You basically have 4 choices: event log, CSV log, syslog, and standard error. And to help you out, I have created this handy flow chart, right? If you're on Windows, you use event log. And I'm not actually going to talk about that because, old joke, I don't do Windows. If you need some help, I can put you in touch with people who can help you with this. If you want to load your logs into a database, use CSV log. If you want centralized logging, you're probably going to be better off using syslog. It's my personal choice. But that may require assistance from your system administrator. If you're looking for something that is super duper easy to set up, go with the standard error option, which works great for you as long as you're the Postgres user, which oddly enough is what we've been using this entire time because it's the default. So logging collector is what we turned on way back at the beginning. Log directory, you can set this to whatever the heck you want. The default's PG log, and that's relative to PG data. You can give this an absolute path if you want. Log file name, I believe these are strf time variables here. Andy might know. It's not, OK. You can name your log file whatever you want.
I don't think they exactly match strf time, but they're
OK, close. OK. Enough that the casual user of strf time will not have a problem with this. Right. Casual users. So log rotation, for those of you who have never done any logging before, this is what keeps your log from growing and growing and growing. Rotation is going to truncate the log, copy it over. Actually, it's going to copy it over to a new file, then truncate it, because otherwise that'd be silly, and then restart it. Postgres will handle the log rotation for you. That's what I love about this option. I don't have to worry about using logadm.conf or anything. You can set it to rotate based either size or time, not both. It's not like your fun Solaris tools in that respect. The only thing you have to make sure of is that the PG user has permissions to write to the directory you want to log to. Otherwise, the database isn't going to start. But it's pretty obvious if this happens. You figure that out pretty quickly. All right. Pros of this one, super easy. Postgres handles the log rotation. Cons, if you want to do centralized logging, you have to figure out how to ship the logs yourself. And you also need to clean up old logs yourself because there's no utility to allow for aging out of your rolled over logs. That's not that hard, right? We can all write shell scripts, maybe. I'm not recommending that you use this. And if you do, please be careful what else you put in that directory. CSV log. It is exactly the same setup as standard error, except you change your destination to CSV log. And restart, reload. The funny thing about this, though, is whatever log file name you have specified in your command, the .log, if you have it there, actually gets popped off and replaced with a .csv. I had a fun time looking for that file, let me tell you. The logs look like this. And I have a lot of empty fields in here just because it's kind of overwhelmingly crazy. But you've got like timestamp, username, database, PID, host, hash, statements, all kinds of fun stuff. Pros and cons with this are similar to with standard error. With CSV log, you get a lot of cool extra stuff without the extra work of having to put that into your log line prefix. You can automatically get SQL state error code, username, database, PID, all that kind of stuff. To me, the coolest thing about CSV log is loading logs into a database as a snap. And we're going to look at that when we look at the analysis tools. The cons of this, personally, I don't like reading a CSV file that has more than like 2 fields in it. It's just, your brain starts saying, really, what am I trying to look at here? And there are a lot of fields. And also, you're stuck with what you get in terms of fields set within Postgres. And you may have to do additional parsing to get what you want. And for me, if I'm going to have to do additional parsing on my logs anyway, I'm just going to take them from standard error or syslog. Syslog, which is what I use. It is simpler to set up from the Postgres side. There are obviously fewer parameters here. It's more complicated from the system side. Most obvious difference is that logging collector doesn't need to be on anymore and that you have this set to syslog. Syslog facility is beyond the scope of this talk. If you want to talk about it with me later, I can help you out. Suffice to say, you want to not use the wrong one, or you can make a big mess. Not like a server down mess or anything but like that, but more like, you know, your buddy came over and left his dirty towel in your bathroom or something. So get your friendly local system administrator to help you with that. Oh, right. OK, message prefix. Now, we'll skip back that up on another slide. Never mind. Strike that from the record. OK. Great things about syslog. Centralized logging is really easy. There are Unix tools already in place to handle this. You can do some really fun stuff with syslog-ng, which I've just started playing with. You can make messages go to different logs based on strings within the log message. Rad, right? Bad things about it are it requires access to syslog.conf. So if perhaps you don't get along with your system administrator, this is probably not going to be a good option for you. Mine is awesome. He's wonderful. And you do need to provide your own log rotation, but again, those are provided by pretty standard Unix tools. So some caveats about syslog. There may be some overhead because Postgres has to communicate with another process in order to log. I've personally not experienced this, but I don't have these super tremendous loads that some people are talking about. In the previous slide, I showed my logline prefix, which includes a timestamp, which is something that the docs specifically recommend you not do because the syslog daemon is already putting a timestamp on the message. Why do you want another one? For me, I want another one because sometimes, you know, network latency can cause messages to arrive out of order. And if I have the local timestamp, I can reorder them very easily. And there's also a little thing with time zone difference. If you're doing centralized logging and your logging server is like in Central Time and the database is in Eastern Time and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're trying to figure out what's going on and you accidentally convert it to like Newfoundland time instead, that's a problem. You know, who's done that, right? That could be solved by putting everybody on UTC, but nobody ever wants to do that with me. Yeah, OK. Sorry. OK, no, that's a different. Syslog.conf is something on your Unix system. It's usually in Etsy. At least it is on Solaris. So, all righty, here's our config so far. We've got log connections and disconnections to cover who's logging in. We got log statement equals mod to cover if they're changing anything. I've got my logline prefix. Got my logmin duration statement set to a rather egregious 5 seconds. And where to log, you get to decide. OK, awesome. So, nifty little thing here. In case you forget and don't feel like going to look up PostgreSQL.conf, you can check your settings from within PSQL. And I am going to put my slides up on the speakers wiki, so you don't need to worry about writing this down. You can also override a configured value from within PSQL session, as long as you have the power, as in you're the Postgres user. That's what I mean by that. I got the power. So, all right, we have logs. Now what, right? They're not going to do you any good just sitting there. Does this look frightening to anyone? I mean, yeah. OK, big spinning blade. OSHA, yeah, this is before OSHA. All right, so what's the best thing you can do with this? Read them, right? If you're a masochistic insomniac, maybe. But I highly recommend looking at your logs before you have a problem. Get a grip on what a normal set of log messages looks like for you. Because you're probably going to have to look through a raw log at some time in your life. Oh, the horror. And it'd be a really good idea to know what your environment looks like before you have to do that. If you find stuff that looks wrong, find out why it looks wrong, and then go fix it. I mean, I kind of think this should be obvious, but I've encountered enough people who think that, oh, you know, I'll just remember that those 3,000 error messages we get at 4 o'clock every day are the normal SOP, as you say. I don't want to deal with that. Start out with your basic Unix utilities and check them out. Of course, you could just throw it into a database. That's what I've been leading up to. And you can also do some automated reporting. So CSV log to database. This freaking rocks. Has anybody tried this? This is just so cool. They have the table creation statement in the documents. You can copy and paste it Okay? There's a new field in 9.0, so don't use the 9.0 docs on an 8.4 database or vice versa. And then it's just copy the log to your table with CSV. Could not be simpler. And as I mentioned before, you do get a lot of cool stuff in there. But the cons of this, again, are the raw logs are not human readable. And this is a super specific example. Duration isn't logged as a separate field. I had logman duration statement set to, I don't know, 5 minutes, and wanted to know about my long queries. But it turned out that the query time was coming in the same field as a statement. And so I was going to have to extract that anyway. I wasn't going to be able to write a query to do it. So it was a toss-up for me. But this is a really simple example of what you can do with your CSV log. And I kind of selected this because date trunc is one of my favorite operators. So I love it. It's so neat. I can make everything line up all nice by hour. So I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing that around 4 o'clock, I've all of a sudden got 2,000 log messages and a whole bunch of warnings. Maybe I need to go find out who's doing something then and find out what they're up to. Everybody know what FNNLC is? Okay. I'll leave you to Google that later. Okay. pgFouine. If you were in Stephen Frost talk, you heard about this. This is a Postgres log parser built in PHP. People often ask, yeah, giggle, PHP. Right, okay. It is what it is. It's an awesome tool. People always ask, what the heck is a Fouine, though? There's a Fouine. It's a stone martin, very cute little guy, kind of like a weasel. Also a Fouine. This is a French rap star. This is what you get when you Google for pictures for your talk. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted that. Okay. I much prefer the pine marten. Okay. It is very, very easy to get started with pgFouine, which gives it big props in my book. The help switch from the command line is actually helpful. The tutorials had me up and running in easily under a half an hour. It'll produce graphics if you have the free text library. I don't, and I don't need graphics, so I don't care. You might. It does take a little while to run. About a 300,000 line log file takes about a minute and a half. We'll see some examples of that when we look at some of the reports. But it does give you a neat little status message every 100,000 lines that it parses, so you know it's still running, which is why I have that -quiet switch suppressed, because I want to see that. It also tells you if it encounters something it doesn't recognize, but it won't die, which is great. This is a command that I use for my daily reports. Just pass it the file, tell it what log type it is, options to the report, HTML format, and I want my top 10 queries. Awesome things about this are, as I mentioned, the docs. You can run it from cron. I love cron. The CSS for the layout is actually included in each of the HTML files, which kind of makes some web people barf, but it makes the reports portable. You can send them to your friends, which we're going to go look at. And oh, I need to figure out how to put this on the other monitor. Oh, I don't know if this will work. Does it? No. Shit. Okay. Pardon me while I have a, oh God, did I just cuss on the thing? Yeah, I did, didn't I? Yeah, I always do that. Keep it, close. So I'm going to have to turn this back, so we may have some more technical difficulties, but we're getting really close to the end of my talk, so it may not be that big of a deal. So, Fouine, and the curtains are in the way. Okay, well, you can fill in the blanks on most of this anyway. Tells you when it was run, tells you which file it was run on, how many lines, and what time frame the log covered. Does this move at all? Is that really bothersome? I can probably shrink this.
It's okay.
Okay. Anyway, so a little more interesting example from my friend Brent. As I said, you can share these with your friends because we don't have anything better to do. So check this out: 37 million lines, 6 hours. Okay, so that's what you're looking at if you've got if you've got a really big log. And this was 1 day's worth of logs too. Really neat. Where am I here? Right, let's go down to most frequent queries because that is easiest to read. So this N here I really like this about Fouine. It'll normalize these queries. You get like this base query here, select exists, blah, 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 where time equals these double quotes. There's a value that is filled in there for each query, but Fouine is extracting that value and taking all those queries that were similar and giving you that as one of your results. And you can see it was executed 6 million times, okay? And so even though the average duration was nothing, 6 million times still adds up to 33 minutes. But what this looks like, you can just expand one, and it'll show you specific little values that were filled in there. So, anybody have any questions about this, or can I resume my normal monitor configuration?
For historical logs, how often do you find that you need to retain the raw logs after generating like the summary report?
For me, well, okay, I keep I think 7 or 8 days worth of logs, period. That's just all I'm really interested in. Usually, if there has been a problem, I've found out about it soon enough that if I have to go back and look, I can figure it out like within the past day or two. Please hold. Now the question is it going to? Yes, the display looks fine. Please. Oh, rad. Okay, so it reset, pardon me. Oh, and it's taken like 8 years, aren't you? Okay, so I will now insert my standard rant about Impress. It is not actually that easy to use, and I kind of wish I had bought a Mac and had Keynote right now, or had maybe done with the bother of converting this to LaTeX. God, I am really sorry. This is not cool. I expected this to pick you back up where you were. Is there a way to do that? I mean, was this user error, or anyone familiar enough with Impress? Has anyone braved Impress? Okay. Yeah, there was a joke at Linux Plumbers Conf several years ago that if I had a nickel for every time that Impress had crashed on a presenter, we would have enough to fund next year's conference. But anyway, yeah, God, sorry, I've got so now you guys know, we've got like a zillion freaking slides. So aren't you thrilled we went through all of this in like 45 minutes? What a great audience. All right, pgFouine, we've got our Friday Night No Life Club, we got the Fouine, we got the other Fouine, we got that. Okay, so cons, finally, I won't do that again. It can be really slow for large logs. Obviously, 6 hours, I mean, do you want to sit around and wait that long? I mean, maybe. And when a process starts taking that long to parse your logs, you have the question of when do you run it? That is going to make it available to everyone and yet also capture the most amount, the primo amount of information. It does require a specific logline prefix. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's in the Fouine docs.
It's a very specific
It is.
thing that you
Yes.
have to have exactly that.
Right, which is why Fouine is also kind of easier to use with CSV log.
And I've seen it consume all the memory of the system.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, if you have, how big was the log, do you know?
I don't remember, but
Atrociously huge, right? Yeah. Yeah. If you're using standard error, it doesn't know what to do with multi-line messages, so you'll only get like the first line and it kind of just spews the others out. But, it's kind of the main Postgres log parser tool, and it's kind of what we've got. So I think it's pretty cool. Oh, right. The other caveat, it will reformat your syntax. I don't know if you noticed those reports, like the queries were all nice and formal SQL syntax with capital select and stuff like that. If you have a lowercase select written in your web app and then have that, Fouine tells you there's a problem with that query and then you go try to find that by using grep, you need to use grep-i because you're not going to be able to find it. I seriously looked for a query one day for like an hour. Where is this thing? I know it's in here somewhere. It doesn't recognize some lines. I think I mentioned that before, but it will spit out a little message for you. So if you're running this from cron, you get an email. Okay, I'm going to blaze through this. PGSI, this is a query analyzer. This is not specifically a log analyzer. If you're looking for something to tell you when your database went down, this is not it. But this can be a really good tool for finding funky queries, shall we say. It's also super easy to use and cronable. Love it. Has a very easy install. Nice highlighting on the report, which I'm sorry, I'm not going to switch to that again. The problem with this, though, is it does require log statement equals all. So you're going to get every single SQL statement that anybody runs in your database. So you've got to be prepared for the amount of data you're going to have there. There's no plain text option to output. I kind of like plain text stuff. And the HTML files aren't portable. You can't share them with your friends, which makes me sad. So those are Postgres-specific options. If you, some more general, I'm going to wrap up here quick through these. More general, just log parsers. Splunk, this is a pay product. This handles generic syslogs and simple application logs very, very well right out of the box. It does need some tweaking to handle Postgres, as in I'm still working on it a couple months later. The pros of this, absolute easiest app install I have ever done in my life, really. I mean, web servers included. They tell you how to start it. The docs are incredible. The interface is intuitive once you learn their lingo, which was a little rough. They do have some pretty stiff hardware requirements. I tried to run it like on, I think, like a Netra T1, which, yeah, I realize that's old, but you try things on the crappy hardware first, right? And it basically brought the server to its knees. It also, as I said, is a pay product. There's a free version. If you have less than 500 megs of logs, you can use the free version. If you have more than that, it's going to be some big bucks. I don't know what size your logs are, but I have more than 500 megs an hour when you include everything that I'm logging. And one of the things about this product is this is the kind of product that when your coworkers see it, they want it too. So you need to kind of account for other people wanting in on the game there. And because it's a pay product, you have to give them your creds to download it, and they will call you. So like give them information's phone number or something. They will call you several times. Logstash is kind of an open source option to Splunk. It has come a long way in the past 6 months since I first gave this talk. Unfortunately, one of the things that it came a long way in is it doesn't run on Solaris 10 right now. But this is another alternative to Splunk if you want to do that sort of thing, or if you already have this in your environment, you can throw your Postgres options in there. There are other generic log parsers. I'm only talking about these two because I've personally dinked with them. All right. One last thing here. If you are not aware of this already, the create user command, if you change the password from PSQL, it's going to log the user's password in plain text in your log. You find this out the hard way, or you get lucky and one of your friends tells you. That's better. Instead, use this \password command. So, extra credit, put your logs on their own partition, really. You don't want, like something happen and leaving auto-explain on and having them just grow totally out of control. You want them to have a set amount of space on your machine that they can take up, or put them on their own machine would be even better. Yeah, don't dig around with your settings and leave for the weekend. Whoops. And monitor your monitoring. Keep track of specifically your log file partitions and how big those files are. Use Nagios to let you know if it's getting bigger than your certain threshold value. I have one of my coworkers wrote me a little shell script that tells me how many lines are in the file, and it updates an RD tool thing, so I get a nice little graph about it. The point there is you want to know if your files suddenly increase in size, because either you've got a problem or somebody altered something that maybe wasn't that great of an idea. All right, so that's it. We now have a wood pile. Okay. Yeah. PDXPug is my user group. They helped me a lot with this. Impress, I don't know. Lucidchart was a free flow charting program. That's where I got that awesome how to decide what kind of log you want to have. That's my mail and Twitter. You can email me if you have questions or comments. So anything else, or do we want to go try to rush the cookies? Yes?
There are audit-related kind of
I'm sorry, what?
Audit-related parameters.
Oracle?
No, in Postgres
Okay.
SQL, particularly Enterprise DB.
Okay.
So how different is that audit-related parameters to this logging-related parameters?
I don't know. Sorry.
Audit, there are a whole bunch of parameters in the PostgreSQL.com.
Yes.
Audit underscore, like
Oh.
the way we have a bunch of log parameters, we also have audit-related parameters.
I'm sorry. I don't understand the question.
In the configuration file,
Uh-huh.
like the way you showed, there are a bunch of parameters for turning on the logging.
Right. Okay.
I saw there are a bunch of parameters related for auditing the database.
For auditing the database.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I haven't done any work with that, so I don't know anything about those. Sorry.
Looks like.
It'd probably be similar, and I would take the same approach with this. I would say, okay, so what happens if I enable this, and then, go from there. Okay.
And it collects a lot of cool stuff. But the concern is how will that collection process impact the database performance?
Whew. Okay, that I can't answer. I think if my suspicion would be, and I'm kind of winging this here, if you're using standard error, just because that's kind of internal to Postgres, it's not going to be that huge of an impact, especially if you only have like the DDL settings. Have your settings be pretty conservative to start with.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Let's see. We turned it on our biggest database. It was generating about 700 gigs a day in logs. I'm sorry, 100 gigs a day.
I was going to say, wow.
100 gigs a day. And we found we didn't see any noticeable performance impact. Jim, am I speaking the truth? I didn't.
He
notice
doesn't know.
anything.
No, I think
it's going to depend on whether you're CPU bound or file bound, because obviously you're generating potentially a large amount of bio. But if you put it on a separate drive or separate folder,
But I think
separate
that's a lot.
100 gigs is a lot.
Yeah.
And then there are a couple other categories. One is blob fields get inserted
Huge,
fully into
yeah.
your log. So before processing, and if you run pgFouine, you'll get blog, like we store email attachments in our database. You get the
Ouch.
whole attachment binary, text code in your pgFouine report, and then
You can kill the video. We're doing discussion now.
so I tended to write the log and write it through a tweener, then strip out binary attachments, and then run pgFouine.
I did not know that about the blobs.
That
Huh.
was quite annoying.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And all these logs are CSV files, or is there option to set it to XML format?
No.
You'd have to go to like syslog.
Yeah,
transform.
yeah. I wonder if you could. Well, no, that doesn't make any
It'd be
sense.
really helpful if all logging, you could set a statistical sample rate.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I only want to randomly log 1 out of every 10.
Oh.
I mean,
That would be neat.
We really don't need 100 gig of logs every day. That is, statistically, it just doesn't make sense to record.
Right, but it
Patch is welcome. What?
You could set logging per user.
You don't want to say query.
Right. I still need to get back with that, don't
Yeah,
I?
yeah.
How about some statistical
If it's really
sampling?
a statistical anomaly, it's probably a human user.
One thing
Probably.
that's worth noting, if you're going to use syslog, if you're going to a remote box, unless you've configured it differently, uses UDP.
Mm-hmm.
Under high traffic.
You're gonna lose stuff. Yeah.
Now, you can use nsyslog and tell it, no, I want IP for this to make it a reliable service.
Which then will, yeah, yeah.
Ka-chunk.
Ka-chunk.
On syslog in a bad condition. So you're trading off where you're going to take it.
If you have PCI or HIPAA concerns, you also just introduced another place you need to
Yeah.
keep track
There's
of
that too.
sensitive data.
Did anyone else have any questions, or are we like in cookie time and discussion and stuff?
I have one more.
Cookie time. Okay. That's fine. Don't be sorry.
Enterprise manager
Okay.
have the visibility to these log files. Like whatever the pgFouine does to generate some reports and whatever, can the Postgres Enterprise Manager does the same?
Do we have someone here from Enterprise Database who can talk about that?
Oh, there's a enterprise DB feature alone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an enterprise DB.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. No, I'm plain old vanilla. Yeah.
Original Postgres.
Oracle. Are you coming from Oracle?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We are trying to get.
Thank you.
Sure. Were you at PGCon?
We are hundreds.
Okay, because there was a guy that looked like he was sitting in the talk, and I was like, wow, he came twice.
You're that good.
Dang, that's awesome. All right, thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.